Welcome to the 100th episode of the Two World Podcast. This is my co-host Barney.
And this is my co-host Jacob.
And we're delighted to be here with you today. Barney, I have to say, I never quite imagined that we would reach 100 episodes. And it's great that we have.
Yeah, I actually, conversely, I kind of thought we would make it to 100 sooner, because I think in our first season, didn't we have like 40?
We were industrious.
Yeah.
We were very committed and regular in our recording. And then the year 2 and year 3 rhythm kind of fell off a little bit.
Right.
We still love to do it.
Yes, exactly. Just being planning or having schedule conflicts or guests or just especially from my end, the time difference has made it a little bit tricky from time to time.
And Barney's being very humble, because there have been quite a few times too where complications have arisen here in Ohio, and I've had to push back. But through it all, we've still loved each opportunity we've had to come together. And today we wanted to make this a special celebration by reflecting with you about our favorite episodes, dream episodes that we have for the future, some of the main themes we've covered, and hopefully it'll just be a fun conversation where you can hear what's on our hearts, and we can share with you some of our appreciation for you sticking with us for 100 episodes.
Yes, so. Yeah, and you sticking with me.
Likewise, and you sticking with me. Thank you. Yeah. So Barney, is there a certain place you'd like to start today, just as we're thinking of launching out?
Yeah, I think actually I had something that happened to me the other day that kind of maybe would be a good way to get started. So I happened to be at Oak Grove Mennonite Church, and then they had a picnic afterward at Ramsire's Farm.
Ramsire's
Farm.
Yes.
One of those three is the right way to say it. And I ran into an old friend from junior high and high school, and because he goes to that church, and he wasn't there during the service, but he was during the picnic, and then just naturally it came up that I said, oh yeah, I'm doing this podcast with the pastor at West Mennonite Church with Jacob Dodson. And then he said, well, what's it about? And then I thought, oh yeah, what are our main themes? How do you explain to someone what the podcast is about? It started off with that great Venn diagram that we have as our logo, of like the idea of two separate things that interact, and where is the space that they overlap, and the connections. And I felt that from there, like our main themes, especially at the beginning, were a little bit of travel and culture, and then of course hospitality came up as a big one.
Yes.
And from there, I feel like it has expanded to include one of the things I wrote down that probably is another one that has just happened is learning. Like I feel like at the end of every episode, I've really learned something that I didn't expect to learn about the topic, or about myself, or about each other, about something else. And I know that we try to, when we close each episode, myself especially, try to stumble through getting this message, this moral of the story over, like, and we hope that you too have thought reflectively as we have about, this topic or that topic. But I think that like myself for sure get this feeling of that, wow, I really learned something. And I want to share that notion. I really hope that our listeners too, wow, you really learned something too about that, maybe specifically about the topic that we talked about, or like during the conversation about that topic, like the unexpected things that arose that we discussed, and hopefully that I and you and the listeners have learned something about that as well.
I love what you said. Yes, I agree. All of those topics have been a huge focus, especially at the beginning. Since we've covered so many topics, the podcast in my mind has shifted to not just like as you said at the beginning, more intercultural experiences and hospitality. Not just that, but now almost a holistic approach to life. And for me, if I had to sum it up, I actually think it's about integration.
Oh.
So, like when you encounter the other and you hear their story, or you learn something from them about their culture or language or just their experience, even if you're both from the same culture, you have this new information and you have a choice. Like, what am I going to do with that?
Mhm.
And our podcast is kind of like at that place of encounter, like, how do I take the good from that and integrate it into my life or draw on
Mhm.
it as I move
Mhm.
forward? And so yeah, so for me, our podcast has become more and more about like the integrated life. How do I not only take the various parts of my own life and let them speak to each other, but also when I encounter someone else in their story, how do I learn something and be open to receive from them and take something from that
Mhm.
and into my own life? So yeah, that's so fascinating. It One of the things I was telling Barney before we started recording is I'm really glad that our podcast wasn't super planned out or rigid or sponsored by a certain organization or something that had to
Mhm.
rigidly follow a certain set of criteria, because we've been able to meander and go through different topics, even on one of our episodes playing around on instruments,
Oh
and
yeah.
practicing the theme song.
Mhm.
But that has given us a sense to be curious and explore that curiosity and apply that to the lens that we have of intercultural experience
Mhm.
and integrating that into our lives. And I'm so grateful. It's been really fun. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that we've had that playfulness to that chance to launch out and be fun like that, and not too rigid. So
Yeah. And I like what you mentioned about integration. And because I also noticed that another of our themes that we tend to look at something differently from a different angle. And I think that in my case, like most I notice a lot of the ways that I'm contributing to that topic is like, oh, well, in Japan it's kind of this way, but when you mention integration and what we learn from there, how do we take hearing about the way things are done in a different culture, and then how can we what bits and pieces of that make sense to us where we are personally, and then how can I adapt that and make it seem natural, not like I'm striving to show everyone, hey, look at this new thing that I learned and this is how they do in a different country and now I'm going to start doing it that way, but to see, oh, that's interesting that that's how it's done, and then how can I really like that, and then how can I take that and make it integrate it into who I am and my life and how I interact with others. And I've really learned a lot about that, like when we talked about neighbors, when we talked about live music and things like that. Then I thought, oh, I hadn't thought of those things in that way. Maybe just from lack of experience, growing up in different neighbors or having different culture where my neighbors are now, and then seeing maybe I can adjust things just a little bit and make it even better than what I have.
yeah, I like what you're saying there, Barney. And this reminds me a little bit of a training that Katie and I went to a few years ago, about intercultural competence. And it talked about how when we experience a new phenomenon, a new culture, that we can have dissonance within ourselves, like cognitive dissonance. And there are several common responses. Either we push back,
Mhm.
or we have rose-colored glasses and romanticize and think, oh, it's so much better than what I
Yeah.
have. But then they talked about this step of integration is like moving beyond just the knee-jerk reaction or the over endorsing of
Uh-huh.
everything from the other, to a place where it's more nuanced, where you're trying to integrate. And then they say the step beyond that is when you start improvising, and building new things after you've integrated. So I guess, if we're talking about our podcast, as having explored this idea of integration, and
Mhm.
we've talked about the difficulties along the way and the blessings, of these intercultural experiences. It would be cool at some point if we hear some stories of like, who's somebody out there, or maybe we ourselves that have experiences with this, or who's trying to do new things with,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
the information from both
Mhm.
contexts.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. Um, so, could we talk a little bit about personal growth?
Oh, yeah. Yes, really.
I feel like when we started podcasting, I really wanted to learn how to interview people better, because our conference, the church that I'm part of, Worcester Mennonite, is in the Ohio Mennonite Conference, and they had a podcast before we started ours called the Ohio Conference Cast. And I used to listen to that and think, oh, that's neat how the hosts, Bill Seymour and Thomas Dunn, are interviewing that person. I want to learn to do that better.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like even if you are not taking a course, just by doing something 100 times, you learn some, little tricks of the trade or things, and so I think for me, in a lot of ways, that this has helped me and grow in that area. And at first I was just thinking about it in terms of recording a podcast, but then I started noticing in conversations I'd had with people that I had a little bit more capacity to follow the thread of what they were saying for quite some time. Whereas before I might have engaged with it some, but I feel like now I was more able, after having talked with you so much and gone back and forth, to build off of what they're saying, like thinking of a tennis match, returning the volley and like keep it going a little longer and more intensively and intentionally. And so that's a growth piece, that I've really enjoyed. Are there any things that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the general production and structure of like interviewing and writing a podcast, whatnot, then I find like I've noticed that how preparation, or just bouncing ideas off of each other, even if it's just a tiny bit, so that we can still maintain the spontaneity, and let ourselves go where we think that we might want to go. That makes such a big difference. Sometimes in some of my, if I'm giving like a presentation or a lesson or something, sometimes I think that, maybe I know what I'm talking about enough that I don't have to really think things through so much before. I can kind of do autopilot. But through this, thankfully, through this process that we do together, that I realize that even just a tiny bit of touch up, will really go a long way, and help our shows to be even better. And like you say, like talking with other ways that we're performing or presenting in front of people, and even maybe talking with people that we haven't spoken with for a while, or even in my case, I have a friend that we send recorded messages to one another through an app, and then I thought, oh well, he's my friend, so I can just kind of wing it. And then it wasn't so good. And then I took the time and prepared what I wanted to say beforehand. And I thought, oh, I really feel like I gave him not necessarily a gift, but I was like a gift, in as the first the first try wasn't so good, and the second try was really much more appropriate, much more, like doing something, like I had put effort into it. And I think that really makes for a better show, and makes for communicating with other people, showing that we're putting in the effort. Something that I really took away from with growth from this podcast and this experience.
Thanks for sharing that, Barney. Another thing that I'll say too, to piggyback off of that, is if you step back from just the skills involved with podcasting and how one can improve those on a personal level, there were quite a few episodes where we talked about deeper parts of our life story. In particular, our episode on grief really stands out to me. We had two of them actually that really stand out to me. One where it was just the two of us talking, and then once we had your other podcasting partner, Sean DeHaven, on. But those experiences were really powerful for me, because I've thought through those experiences myself, losing my mom, or you as well, having lost your mom, like thought about them. But then when we came together and compared our stories, it was very powerful. And another one that has really been meaningful is, and this is probably my favorite episode, is Hey Dad, Can I Ask You a Question? Where we talked about parenting. And I don't know, just the fact that we both are parents and have been able to, answer a lot of our kids' questions over the years and relate them to our own childhoods. That episode really spoke to me on a deeper level. And so helped me grow and think more intentionally about how I parent, just like the grief episode helped me think more about how I grieve. Very meaningful. So that would be another personal part of
Oh
the
yeah.
journey. So
Yeah.
in addition to getting to know you more as a friend too,
Yeah, that's right.
which is another wonderful
Yeah.
part of podcasting. So
Yeah. I kind of speaking on everything as a whole. So I really enjoyed listening to that. So even getting back to the very beginning of why we hadn't reached 100 sooner, thinking about the episode where it was just you and Matthew
oh yeah,
Capizzuto,
Capizzuto.
Capizzuto, and the it felt like a lesson. The episode was very good and interesting, and especially hearing Matt talk about all of his his expertise on that the doodling and whatnot. And then when I was listening to it, I kept thinking, oh, I would have wanted to say this at this time or this at that time. And I wanted to be there at that episode, but just my schedule didn't let me. It changed so suddenly that I couldn't join. But then when we had him on again, and I wonder how you felt or how listeners perceived kind of the difference, because you could kind of see here's example A, and then here's example B, with the team back together. And
Yeah,
there's really this dynamic that we've
for sure,
developed. And
for sure.
like you say, like a tennis match,
Yes.
how we can freely build off of what each other's saying. And then our experiences and perspectives are different enough that we take the same topic and then add different ideas from different, maybe unexpected
Yeah.
directions, and then go from there. And
100%. I'm glad you brought that up because I loved my time with Matt when it was just the two of
mm-hmm,
us, but I felt diminished as a host because we build off of each other in our
mm-hmm,
question
mm-hmm,
asking. And it's interesting because not every comment that somebody gives tweaks a new idea in your mind. But if there's two of you,
oh yeah,
there's a greater chance that something dynamic will be sparked by
mm-hmm,
what's said, and it will propel the conversation to new heights and to the next thing. And
mm-hmm,
so Matt and I had plenty to talk about. But the second time we interviewed him and we did it together, that
mm-hmm,
dynamic was back. And I
mm-hmm,
agree, it added more to me, just as a host, dynamism to the
mm-hmm,
conversation,
mm-hmm,
which I appreciated.
mm-hmm,
So yeah,
mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful. And that's why it's I for me, podcasting, I just can never imagine being a solo
Oh
operation.
yeah,
Like having a partner to me
mm-hmm,
seems essential because
mm-hmm.
dialogue seems so much more dynamic to me than monologue. I mean,
Yeah,
for me
yeah.
personally, yeah,
Even if you're having guests, yeah,
right,
it's different if it were just one on one, right?
right,
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I guess what would the term be? Trialogue.
Yeah,
If we
I
have
think so.
had two of us
Yeah.
interviewing a guest, but that type of conversation is so different and dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I wanted to ask, as we talked about growth in our experiences that have we've changed over the years,
Mm-hmm.
are there times when a podcast episode or a series of episodes changed your perspective on something, or you helped you see something a little bit um, differently, or maybe something that appeared as a negative at first became more positive with
Uh-huh.
further
Uh-huh.
reflection, or
Uh-huh.
you overcame the negative feelings associated with
Right,
it or
right,
something.
right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, when we were, I think that probably some more ideas will come to mind as I speak, and then I hear what you have to say. But yeah, I was thinking, especially talking about when we talked about grief, and then just the other day, my uncle passed away, and
Mm,
but he lived far enough away that we didn't really, and then he was a bit older than my dad, that in a way we didn't really meet them so many times. And so I didn't know what to expect going to the funeral, because I didn't just I just didn't know him so well. And then I didn't even really know my cousins so well. And then but then hearing but then still trying to keep, to understand, being able to see and understand and anticipate what my cousins and my one aunt, my other aunt, my dad's sister, and then what other people are feeling. And then I noticed that I really got a lot out of the surface, and not just hearing his kids and grandkids talk about him, and how they knew him. But being able to take the lessons that they knew from his life and then see them, how that impacts my life too. And then I really left. I was glad that I went, because I just happened to be in America at that time. And then I was glad that I went, and then I was able to, I think, understand what they were going through, and then kind of support them in a way, my relatives in a way there. And then I was also able to really see more about myself and about grief, and continuing that journey, from having gone there as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I definitely can relate to that too. I think maybe for me, when I when I think of some of our earlier episodes about intercultural experiences, since you've traveled so much, I have by and large mostly positive experiences from my times abroad or when I've had intercultural experiences, but some of them weren't positive. And some of them left a sour taste in my mouth, or I had some baggage or negative thoughts afterwards. And I'd say just in the way that we've talked through some of our experiences, trying to keep it positive and focusing mostly on the positive, but like just hearing you often unpack, like living right now in another country and building your own knowledge base of how to navigate, life in another country. It's helped me process my own experiences with a new light. Like, oh, like Barney encountered this when he was trying to get his driver's license, and he realized through the process he could help other people. And he took a negative and he was patient, and it turned out to be good in the end. And so, and you saved a ton of money, and like, because you didn't have to go through a driving class, or like different, conversation pieces where, I came away feeling like, oh, I should be more patient, or try to understand more the context behind why this was said or that was done. So I think that that's part of just basic, probably intercultural confidence, is you learn how to check your own expectations. But you've helped me grow in that, and so thank you. I think that's been a shift in my perspective from negative to positive. And then I think what we talk a lot about language, and how like language is used and learning languages. And I think my understanding of learning language and how I use language has been enriched. And so I don't know that it's necessarily like a change in perspective, like I didn't like words before, or but I think it's just deeper now. So yeah. So maybe we could spend a little time thinking about some of the other topics we've covered, because we look back over our list of episodes before starting our recording today, and it's just interesting. Like, there's quite a few things there. Excuse me. So I want to mention a few, and then maybe you could mention some. So we talked quite a bit about everyday life, like making breakfast and gardening and hobbies. But we also talked about seasons of life, being middle-aged, and seasons in the year, like wintertime, traditions, like traditions around Christmas, or cultural traditions. As I mentioned earlier, we've talked about cultural expressions and language, but we've also talked about maybe what you could call a global perspective, or thinking about issues or topics from multiple cultural viewpoints. Faith and spirituality has been really another neat dimension, because like we both on our own have an interest in faith and spirituality, but just being able to explore it on the podcast has been really neat. Are there some topics that jump out to you too that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think some of the favorite things that this isn't necessarily adding, but like looking at everyday ideas, I think has been great, especially since living in Japan. Then I can usually add a little bit more flavor to that, just because I never expected some like the bakery one where we talked about 3 types of bread. I never expected a Japanese bakery to look like that. And then then when I come back, then I can kind of appreciate how these were when I was growing up, and maybe and maybe kind of seek out more options, to try to have it, they're especially as things are getting more globalized, then people are sharing recipes and whatnot, and then seeing the ways that even the bakery has changed from when I was little, and then now even in the US, and seeing a lot of new things to appreciate about the way things are done here too. And then about like maybe a new topic, I noticed that especially in season 2 we had a real run of talking with people who were in different cultures as well.
That was great.
Yeah, and I really like that, from Chinese New Year to Michael Ludwig in Niger, and then Katrina in Australia, and working in pharmacy,
and Molly Sponsler in Germany.
Yeah, exactly. And it was also neat. It's so neat to see how each guest I don't know, acts or is differently on a podcast. Especially in your case, Molly and Michael are your dear friends, and Matt too. And then and you can kind of, maybe you've noticed, when we're just one-on-one, or just, and as we have been, like seeing your church or whatnot this way. And then, it's kind of interesting to see them on the podcast. Oh, they act a little bit differently this way.
Yeah, that's true. Did I have a question? Did John Roth seem pretty consistent when he was on?
Yeah,
he seemed so relaxed. Like he's spoken so many times and publicly.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. And just a quick refresher, John Roth is a professor that Barney had when he was at Goshen, who has become quite an influential person in the Mennonite world. And in addition to his many publications, he's now doing this Anabaptist 500 project, which is pretty neat, because the 500th anniversary of Anabaptism is coming up in 2025.
Yeah.
Well, what did you think about when we talked about life experiences and weddings? I felt like that weddings episode was really fun, and how you were able to kind of compare your two ceremonies, right? Because you said that it almost sounded scandalous, that episode. You're like, I've been married twice. And it's like, well, I mean, in what sense are you meaning it? But then with the two different ceremonies, it was really fun. So another area we've covered. And I think like you said, a lot of times when a topic comes up, you're able to compare it to something that you've experienced or witnessed in Japan. And so I loved when we were talking about raising kids and seasons of life, like even the transitions in the school year for your sons. I think, was there a special celebration when you finished kindergarten?
Oh yeah.
Or is it at certain points there's is it certain years, or trying to remember?
It's so like at the very, when you enter a school.
Okay.
Yeah, and then also when you graduate.
Okay. Okay. And when would one typically graduate from, like, elementary age?
I think elementary is the same, 6th grade.
6th. Okay.
Right. Okay. But I think, is there any kind of like celebration for when kids start a school?
Not that I can think of.
I thought that was different. Yeah.
We had a 5th grade celebration. For some reason, where I was from, 5th grade was the last year in elementary school, and I remember there was a celebration, and then celebration from middle school, 8th grade, and then high school. But did you have any types of
No. So that was really different from me. All of this celebrating, because the only celebrating we had was high school.
Yeah.
Right. Because there was everything else here, just keep on going.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about, since we covered this smattering of topics, some of our references to favorite episodes came up. Would you like to say more about a favorite episode or episodes?
Oh yeah. I think these two that always come to mind right away are my favorite, because they were unexpected, the way that the idea of talking about them, and then how they went during the episode. I think that the one about coffee
Ah,
was probably
that's
my
so good.
favorite.
I do love that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I not to toot my own horn, but like at the near the end, it dawned on me, and I remember saying how here is it has a dichotomy to coffee, because here's this drink that has the caffeine in it that's supposed to energize you. But a lot of the time when we're having coffee with friends, we're sitting down together and enjoying coffee.
Ah,
So
yeah.
it's so neat how this stimulating beverage isn't necessarily to meant to, give you the oomph to make it through the day, but maybe just to like help stimulate your conversation together.
I like that.
Yeah.
I the episode we did on coffee for the YouTube video, I was able to post a
Mhm.
thumbnail of a time that you and I visited this local place in Worcester called Tulipan, which is a great Hungarian coffee place.
Mhm.
And I just loved that layer that we were talking about coffee, and then we could refer to a time we'd gotten coffee
Mhm.
together, um, and then see it up there visibly, us together. Because normally when we're podcasting, we're um, connecting through Zoom from um, far away,
Yeah.
US to Japan. But today, for 100th, for those who are seeing the video,
Yeah.
you see us together. We're recording this from Worcester, Ohio, from the office that I have at Worcester Mennonite Church. So it's pretty special to be together for this
Yeah.
celebration. Yeah, but were you going to say
Yeah.
more?
And
Yeah.
then I forgot to mention that also in the coffee episode, you were able to give us some real significant context when you also showed the image of how intensive it is to make a cup of coffee.
Yes.
And then that, going back to what we were talking about, personal growth, that helped me to realize that I should savor it and be conscientious of it
Mm,
even more.
mm.
And yeah, I was glad that we added that to it.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
That was a really fortunate thing because my wife, for quite a few years here, has worked at Smucker's and they have a whole coffee section. And since she works there, they have charts and things that they have displayed in the workplace. And so I had learned some of these things from
Mhm.
her. So that was
Mhm.
neat. Um, do you remember the episode we did about the mutuality of mentoring, where we
Oh
talked about
yeah.
mentors?
Mhm.
For some reason, that one meant a lot to me
Huh.
because I think I was able to just basically say thank you to some
Uh-huh.
really impactful people in my life. Um, my doctoral advisor, Amos Young, Marvin Lorenzana, who had been a mentor during a time we were doing the Missional Discipleship
Mhm.
Initiative in Ohio Conference. Anyway, I sent that little, because you can send a YouTube video to somebody and start it at a certain
Oh
point, and
yeah.
I sent the part of it that we had done related to my doctoral advisor, Amos Young. I sent it to him, and he wrote me back, and it was so
Oh.
nice. And
Oh.
it maybe was a similar feeling you had to when John Roth was on.
I
This
oh
kind
yeah.
of
Must be.
connection with somebody who you really admire and
Mhm.
appreciate. And but I don't know. I just something about that episode really. I felt like our conversation, the give and take, the way we were able to
Mhm.
share, and the topic and the subject matter, it was very meaningful to
Mhm.
me. So,
Mhm.
um, are there any other episodes that stand out that are up there as like top of the towards the top or
Yeah. Yeah, the other one that comes to mind is the one that we did on smells.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because that was one where I know that like we kind of had to cut, we had kind of had to call it to an end.
Yes.
And then even afterwards, we still kept chatting
Oh, I love
a
when that
little bit
happens.
more. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
We normally keep talking just to catch up, but like sometimes we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
the episode, that more things we could have said.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember one we did called Lost and Found?
Mm-hmm.
It was called Rediscovering Treasures and Relationships.
Oh
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah.
uh, that was one where, so there were several things. This kind of connects with, we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about grief earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There were several times where like I have found things over the years that were remind me of my mom. Like one thing was a CD
Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
of her teaching
Yeah.
actually at the church that I'd grown up in, the Wheeling Vineyard. And so we did an episode where I could kind of unpack that,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
and then there were just a few other episodes. And that one was one of those where I was able to talk about some of those things that I found that
Yeah.
was really helpful. So I don't know why that's really high up
Yeah.
there for me. Um, so you had mentioned before we started recording what could be a dream episode, like a scenario that you just think would be tremendous to have. So I would love to hear any thoughts you have about like an episode that you would just love to be able to record in the future.
Oh yeah. I can think of a lot of different ones, like leading up here to my dream one. So like recording on location
Oh yeah,
somewhere, like
yeah.
even if it were like in Japan would be really neat, but
I
like
would love that.
yeah, like not necessarily at my house, but like just somewhere in Japan and then recording the episode as it's going on around us.
I think we should go to Martin Park and record.
Yeah.
That's an inside joke. If any of you remember from an earlier episode,
I think my extension cord would reach there. So yeah.
The inside joke is, I don't know if we can say it succinctly. The little green space by Barney's house.
Yeah.
He just named it on Google Maps Barney Park or Martin Park, and then it took
still there. Yeah.
Still
there.
So
yeah. But then I think like taking many different elements from our episodes and our themes and our topics, I think it would be so neat if we could have this one author that that my mom really enjoyed reading, that I have started reading, Susan Woods Fisher. If and she actually has her own radio. She, in the back of her book, it lists as a radio show. I'm not sure if that's just another way to write a podcast, but she has her own show talking about a lot about Amish wisdom and lifestyle and whatnot. And just her books meant a lot to my mom. And then as I read them, they mean a lot to me. And so that would be my dream episode, being able to interview her on the show.
I love it. I love it. We should try to
at least send something out. If because I never guessed that John Roth would be a guest. So
that's true. And that was amazing. Believe it or not, my dream episode would be either us interviewing Ayako or us interviewing Katie, but I think it was a tall order to get either of our wives onto here. But it would be a dream if we could do it.
That would be nice.
And if we could interview them together, that would really be like icing on the cake.
Everything would have to align for that. Yeah, really. Yeah.
I think that would be fantastic. One other one I'll put out there is actually the person I mentioned before, Amos Young, who now is teaching at Fuller Seminary, but he's the head of their kind of school of missions. And I just think he would be a really fascinating guest. And he could talk a lot about intercultural experiences too, because he's had a lot of them in his life. I think he would be a really fun, meaningful guest to have. So
yeah, I was going to say that's one of the sad things about our time differences. Usually if someone's on the East Coast in America, we can get it to work. But like Susan Woods Fisher, she lives in San Francisco. I'd be willing to wake up early for that. And probably Amos Young, like
Pasadena
is right. California, and then even Joe Capizzuto is also in California.
Los Angeles. Right. That would be hard.
So all three of those.
How do we make Germany work with Molly? Do you remember how we did that?
She was accommodating for us. Yeah, it was her afternoon. So that one wasn't so, because like she's like right in the middle between our time zones.
Okay.
So yeah, she was very, very kind.
But for you, it's so late.
Yeah, I would have to really prepare myself for that one. But for the right guests, for sure, for either of those three guests, I would be more than happy to. Make that work.
The only other way to get around that is if we took a field trip and went to California. We record all of us. You mentioned Joe Capizzuto. He would also be a dream guest. I keep asking and inviting, so we'll see if I ever get him.
Should face the camera and say that.
Yeah, Joe, please come on. Please come on the podcast. Are there any other questions or things you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, like this has kept coming in the back of my mind. Talking about like interacting with people who listen to the podcast. Like I know that the World Cup, the Omotenashi in Japan. Yes. I think wasn't that someone mentioned to you that
was one of our guests, Michael Ludwig. He said, I think you guys should do an episode on this. And he just sent me a message, and I loved that. That was fantastic. And we did.
Yeah. And for me, a lot of the interaction I get is just through my dad, because he listens to each one. And then it's so neat to hear his reactions to our episode, because he's very kind in what he gives me feedback, or
Yes.
just shares his opinion, and that has helped me to learn a lot, because when we're in the moment, then I think we do learn things and recognize things, and then afterwards is when we start to process it more, and then hearing someone, their perspective helps me to really process what the episode was about. So in cases like middle age or parenting or whatnot, it was really nice for me to hear back from my dad and how he perceived the episode as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, and it's really probably important to mention too that one of our regular guests, he's almost like a third co-host, we should say, Ken Naines, does all of our segments with us on Northern Exposure episodes, but he is actually quite generous in giving us positive affirmation after just other normal episodes. Quite a few times he's written messages or commented on something we shared. So thank you, Ken, for your encouragement. That's fantastic. And then I have had occasional comments here or there, like when we did the episode about AI, one of my pastor friends said, "Oh, that was an interesting episode, and I learned some new things," because we were talking about how it relates to ministry, and so that was kind of fun.
Oh yeah.
And so here or there, certain episodes jump out to people. Actually, the one that we did with your dad about serving with MCC in Brazil, Nate Holton, who serves at Central Christian School now as their superintendent. He said something to me about that episode in particular. He's like, "Oh, I saw that episode with Ron Martin." I thought, "Oh, that's pretty cool." So, you never know which episode is going to catch the attention of which other person. So, yeah, that's great. Thanks for mentioning it. And we probably should say, for all of you who are viewing this online or listening, thank you. You've probably maybe potentially been people who have said something to us, or just by taking time to listen to our content, it means a lot and is an encouragement to us. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. And thank you again, Barney.
Yes, likewise.
Reaching 100 is pretty awesome.
Yes, sir.
Pretty awesome. And can't wait to keep going and explore new territory.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And shall we bring, for all of you listening and watching along, we are 100 times grateful and beyond, and we are looking forward to the next episode and hope that you are as well. And we'll keep these coming just because it's such a joy for us, and we appreciate you listening along and watching along as you're able to. And we will see you again next time on the Two World Podcast for Jacob and myself, Barney. Bye.